Imagine having to put up with an alarm clock ringing that you can't turn off every day for 13 years. We first told you about this clock stuck in a wall of a home in Ross Township last month.
Having neighbors is a fact of life. More often than not, you end up with more than one, and the chances are high that at some point they'll do something to get on your nerves. Maybe you find yourself stuck with the most mischievous neighbors who take annoying to a whole new level. Some folks in that nightmarish situation finally say enough is enough. From using crow callers to outright destroying property, join us as we show you 15 people who decided to get revenge on their neighbors. Number 15. Ohio residents destroyed a neighbor's vehicle. Territorial disputes between feuding neighbors have been known to get pretty ugly at times. Take these enraged Ohio residents who went absolutely berserk on their poor neighbor's car, demolishing it all because of an alleged minor parking violation. The story goes that some new folks moved into this formerly peaceful neighborhood and immediately started carelessly parking their vehicles in front of other people's garages like they owned the place. Big mistake. That's a classic neighborhood no-no. Right up there with blasting music until 3 a.m. or letting your dog use your neighbor's perfectly manicured lawn as its own personal toilet. But these arrogant newbies didn't get the memo, or more likely just didn't care. Well, their inconsiderate parking quickly pushed the wrong buttons when they brazenly blocked one resident's garage one too many times, preventing him from accessing his own property. That was the last straw. This guy saw red and decided it was time for some good old-fashioned revenge. He angrily rounded up a crew of fed-up neighbors, and they took to the offending vehicle theirself. First, they tried using trucks to directly go over the car. Then they ruthlessly smashed all the windows, caved in the doors, and dented every single body panel until that disrespectful car was battered beyond all recognition. The shocking damage sent a strong message to that inconsiderate parker. Do not mess with other people's rightful parking spots around here if you know what's good for you. This guy and his vigilante crew meant business. Though taking a baseball bat to someone else's ride is still probably not the most lawful or measured response when tensions hit the boiling point, maybe just get the rude parker towed next time? Or leave a strongly worded note to air your grievances in a more civilized fashion? The moral here is to respect your neighbor's space and don't escalate petty disputes into all-out turf wars. A little thoughtfulness and compromise go a long way when living in close proximity to others. Number 14, angry millionaire versus fence. Money can't buy good neighbor manners, as one rich dude proved when he threw a fit over a fence dispute. After already cheesing off his whole neighborhood by building some ostentatious bowling alley, movie theater, and casino complex on his property, this rude millionaire added insult to injury by tearing down his neighbor's fence in a rage. Why? They put it up to block their view of his unsightly monster building. But Mr. Moneybags took offense and had a meltdown, demolishing their fence. Security footage shows him chucking a bin and pushing the fence down like a bratty toddler. So much for class when you're filthy rich. The trampled neighbor was left rebuilding while the millionaire faced no real consequences besides some online shaming. Maybe next time he could try using his words, not throwing a rich guy tantrum and demolishing things. But when neighbors have crazy wealth gaps, chill conflict resolution goes out the window. Number 13. Villagers get revenge on bad driver. Lazy methods of neighborhood speed enforcement will only get you so far against truly stubborn, reckless drivers. But the ingenious residents of a small Polish village concocted a more creative solution for curbing the dangerous antics of a local freeway hellraiser. This belligerent speed demon tore through town in his car at absurd speeds. He never listened to warnings and blew off even the mayor's pleas to slow down. With no speed bumps or cops stopping him, he kept blazing through. So the fed-up villagers took matters into their own hands. In the dead of night, they used a crane to hoist the reckless driver's car up into a tall tree in the forest. Imagine discovering your vehicle just vanished mysteriously, but the villagers stayed silent, refusing to spill to cops how the car came to sit 10 meters up a tree. Without leads, the police were powerless, and the stranded driver was left scratching his head for days. While extreme, the villagers felt their bizarre civil disobedience was justified to protect their streets from this hazard. Sometimes ensuring road safety requires guerrilla tactics when all else fails. It sent a message their village wouldn't stand for reckless driving from some flashy hotshot. In the end, maintaining positive neighborhood relations is safer than infuriating whole towns by disregarding lives. Number 12, farmer takes action. Scorned neighbors plotting revenge should take note of this courageous farmer's epic act of retaliation when a group of vehicles trespassed on his private land. Tired of repeated warnings being ignored, the farmer decided to take matters into his own hands in a most ingenious way. For some time, visitors to a nearby flea market had been using the farmer's field as a parking lot without permission. Despite multiple no parking signs posted around the area, the brazen motorists continued leaving their vehicles on the off-limits land. After asking nicely failing to change their behavior, the at-his-wits-end farmer opted for a more direct approach. One day, upon finding dozens of cars parked in his field yet again, he got into his tractor and plowed right through them. With little regard for the badly parked vehicles, the farmer furiously tilled the soil surrounding the cars, leaving them stuck in the freshly turned dirt. Many were unable to drive out, their tires spinning uselessly on the loose ground. Justice served. While the eccentric farmer's technique was undoubtedly destructive, few could blame his fed-up reaction after countless warnings went unheeded. And this was his property. He can do whatever he wants. The incident conveyed a clear message to those inconsiderate trespassers who had taken advantage of his property. Do not underestimate a farmer's resolve when provoked. Perhaps next time, these wayward drivers will think twice before parking where they shouldn't. Number 11. Man wraps neighbor's car in film. Crowded city living can turn little annoyances into crazy overreactions between neighbors. Take this guy pushed over the edge when his neighbor briefly blocked his driveway one morning. Rather than leave a polite note, he responded outrageously. The normally reasonable man had a surprising meltdown after a neighbor made the harmless mistake of partially blocking his driveway while rushing her kids to school. Instead of gently reminding her not to block driveways, he actually went out the same morning and purchased several massive commercial rolls of thick black plastic sheeting film of the type commonly used to wrap loaded pallets for shipping or storage. Then he proceeded to encase her entire blameless car in layers of thick black plastic wrap, turning it into an odd plastic-wrapped eyesore. Sure, it was annoying, but wrapping her property in plastic was uncalled for and seriously excessive. One can only imagine coming outside to find your vehicle mysteriously looking like a DIY Batmobile. Well, a quite ugly one. The wrap even ruined the exterior paint job when removed. Ironically, the woman apologized profusely and assured him that she would never park there again. But the unhinged neighbor should have pursued simpler, non-felonious solutions besides vandalizing an innocent person's car over a negligible annoyance. Number 10. Snow-throwing neighbors. Get ready to witness the most mature and unneighborly display ever. These battling next-door guys get themselves into an icy cold feud that's gonna leave their relationship frozen. We watch as this dude's neighbor spends forever shoveling thick, heavy snow and just heaving it right over the fence into the other guy's yard. Super helpful, right? But this guy doesn't seem to mind. He just stands there, watching his annoying neighbor dump pile after pile of snow into his yard without a care in the world. This guy is simply waiting for Mr. Rude Neighbor to finish up his yard-clearing masterpiece. That's when this guy makes his move, revealing his own devilish scheme. Yup, you guessed it. He grabs a shovel and starts loading all that snow right back into his not-very-nice neighbor's yard. Isn't karma a blizzard? So much for being kindly neighbors. This wintry exchange is petty payback at its finest, and could provide days of chilly entertainment and calories burned. An icy new exercise routine is born. Turns out everyone's a winner in this snowy spat. One guy gets his revenge, the neighbor gets his workout, and they both get to secretly feud behind icy smiles, and we get to play referee in the great snow shovel showdown. Nothing like creatively burying your neighborly woes under piles of the cold, cold opposite of love. Number 9. Driver's perfect revenge. Finding your driveway blocked by a carelessly parked vehicle can certainly spark annoyance for any homeowner. But rational people brush off minor issues by calmly asking drivers to move their cars. However, one disturbingly vengeful man took driveway obstruction extremely personally, pursuing wayward payback on the innocent offending automobile. The troubling incident happened after the man returned home to discover a car parked across his driveway, preventing him from accessing his own property. Already in a foul mood, he became unreasonably enraged by this perceived attack on his driveway sovereignty by a clearly clueless motorist. But rather than tracking down the driver or leaving an informative note requesting future courtesy, the unhinged man hunted down a vehicle tow rope. He then forcibly hitched the unsuspecting car up to his own truck and towed the helpless vehicle straight out of his precious driveway onto the middle of the road. The overkill maneuver left the previously blocked-in driver spewing rubber and spinning wheels just to return their auto to a lawful parking spot. And the internet roared in delight at video footage documenting the driveway defender's pathologically excessive reaction. In truth, the simplest and most neighborly solution would have been asking the city to quickly tow the car at the driver's expense. Even placing a polite note explaining driveway etiquette may have prevented future annoyance. But those grounded options pale in comparison to personally dragging the offending automobile out in a blaze of rubber-burning glory. Perhaps after his dramatic display, the possessive pavement protector felt some satisfaction. But was the risk of damage and danger worth defending a slab of concrete from minor temporary use? For backyard vigilantes like this guy, teaching trespassing cars a tow rope lesson comes before reason and neighborly communication. His triumphant act begged one question: who really blocked who that day? Number 8. Rise and shine. Finding an affordable apartment in the energetic hustle and bustle of an urban city often leads eager new renters down a path of auditory woe once the harsh reality sets in of just how paper-thin the shared walls between units actually are. But some tenants, pushed far beyond their absolute tolerance limits by the relentlessly noisy neighbors partying on the other side of those quasi-cardboard walls, have executed cunning and creative schemes of audio revenge. One prime example of such bold audio retaliation involved a relieved-to-be former tenant CK from the Tooral films. He reached his absolute breaking point after suffering months of maddening all-night noise bombardment, originating from the utterly inconsiderate couple renting the apartment unit directly below his. The aggravating and endless blend of blaring music with intense bass, horrendous screaming fights between the couple, and loud banging of a headboard against their shared wall reached unbearable levels of disruption on an almost nightly basis. So, right before finally moving out for the sake of his sanity, the embittered CK meticulously hatched an elaborate and nefarious act of pre-dawn justice against the deafening neighbors who had made his life hell. He purchased a big number of the most obnoxiously loud analog alarm clocks available on the market, very carefully setting each one to ring at the mercilessly early hour of 3:30 a.m., when he knew his neighbors would likely be in their deepest sleep. He then strategically mounted the alarms very closely spaced apart along one shared wall that directly adjoined his neighbor's apartment bedroom. Right below the alarm clocks, CK taped up a giant, passive-aggressive, taunting cardboard sign on the wall that arrogantly read, "Rise and shine," adding vicious insult to the imminent rude awakening in store. After painstakingly rigging every element of his elaborate sound trap, CK moved out for good, leaving his inconsiderate neighbors doomed to atone each and every morning by frantically scrambling out of bed to silence the unrelenting racket from the alarms they couldn't. Number 7. Vehicle on fire. We all get pissed off at other people sometimes, but most of us don't let our anger escalate into full-blown arson. Not this fiery lady, though. She let her rage burn out of control when she literally set fire to an acquaintance's vehicle in a fit of unbridled fury. The truly shocking footage shows her smashing in the rear window with a vengeance before dousing the entire vehicle in gasoline with wanton abandon. She then flicks in a lit match without a care in the world. Boom! The Jeep explodes into an outright inferno right before her eyes. But the explosion unexpectedly blows back at her, singeing her own face. Serves her right for playing with fire. She tries to flee the scene in panic after realizing the immense destruction she has wreaked. But the damage is already done. Her acquaintance's vehicle is fully engulfed in a blazing bonfire, utterly destroyed by her flaming act of vengeance. So what possibly could have driven this woman over the edge to commit such an extreme criminal act? Apparently, the guy whose vehicle she reduced to cinders had absolutely no idea why she torched his ride. He claimed they weren't even dating or anything. She didn't have any kind of grudge or vendetta against him specifically. The woman just lost her mind in the heat of the moment and decided to take her fiery rage out on this poor, innocent chap's vehicle. He was just an unlucky stranger who happened to be in the path of her inexplicable pyromaniac vengeance. The moral of this fiery story is clear. No matter how angry you get at someone, arson is never the answer. If you're feeling vengeful, you've got to find more positive ways to channel that hazardous energy before you land yourself in the slammer for a very long time. Lighting your acquaintance's car on fire is pretty much guaranteed to get you thrown straight in jail, no questions asked. This woman is facing some very serious felony charges for her flaming act of destruction. Sorry for the man who got his car crispy grilled for no reason at all. Number 6. Cigarette butt neighbors. Nothing's more nasty than your upstairs neighbors using your patio as their own personal ashtray. After months of being a human stub collector, this non-smoker gave his smoking neighbors a piece of his mind. The British bloke was sick of finding heaps of tossed cigarette butts from the unit above all over his patio. Annoying to some, but to him a totally gross nuisance at his own home. After grumbling about it endlessly, he penned his upstairs neighbors an angry letter demanding they start disposing of their nasty butts properly. But the scolding didn't help, so he gathered up all the butts they'd flung onto his patio and returned them in a bag with an even more hostile warning. "Stop using my patio as your ash bin or this bag of cigarette butts goes on your doormat." His reaction showed that his patience had burned up like those cigarette butts. Sometimes shocking rude neighbors with their own waste pushes the message home better than asking nicely. Cigarette butt debris easily builds up to become a health and environmental nuisance when smokers fail to properly dispose of them. And for non-smokers forced to encounter remnants of the filthy habit around their home, patience understandably wears thin. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. Raise your hand if you've ever had a nightmare neighbor. You know, the kind that accidentally blocks your driveway every day. Most of us have dealt with an inconsiderate neighbor at some point. You probably want to tell them how much you dislike them, but don't want the ugly confrontation. Well, the person who sent in this photo found an excellent petty way to get their point across without an explosive Barney. They shaped their front yard hedge into a person bending over. Now, whenever their neighbors look out their window, all they see is this hedge staring back at them all day long. Genius bit of passive-aggressive revenge, or downright rude and crossing the line. You decide. Have you ever gotten creatively petty with your own troublesome neighbors? Share your stories in the comments below. Number 5. Who can be louder? Very few recurring issues routinely escalate tensions and breed conflict between neighbors more often than the growing curse of pervasive noise pollution generated by that single, chronically loud and inconsiderate resident on the block. However, some frustrated people that become pushed far beyond their reasonable limit by the constant noise bombardment from a neighbor have responded creatively through clever acts of acoustic retaliation. One especially memorable recent example of such fed-up noise payback involved a homeowner who was fully ready and willing to absolutely exhaust all civil options available after countless unfruitful past pleas for the nightmarishly noisy neighbor family next door to simply reduce their bass to reasonable volumes. For months, they had cranked music with absurdly loud and floor-vibrating bass from their high-end home stereo system that literally vibrated the desperate man's walls on a daily basis. Completely fed up and at the absolute end of his rope, the man finally aggressively took noise management matters into his own hands in the form of an elaborate technological retaliation system. He carefully installed and set up an automated sound detecting network composed of high-sensitivity directional microphones, strategically installed in key locations surrounding the outside of his house. The external microphones were configured to continually measure and analyze all ambient noise decibel levels originating from the chronically noisy neighbor's property. Through integrated decibel monitoring software algorithms, the microphone network vigilantly monitored the incoming volume data, constantly listening for any noise that exceeded a maximum nuisance loudness threshold, for more than a brief period of time. Upon the system detecting this acoustic trigger condition, the obnoxious neighbor's music delivering yet another serving of completely unreasonable ear-splitting bass chaos, it promptly kicked into brilliant retaliation mode. The external microphones automatically fed the loud input signals to a pair of the man's own powerful loudspeakers that he had aimed pointed directly toward the neighbor's home optimal sound transfer. The automated system intelligently continued blasting the deafening counter-assault until the disrespectful neighbors finally got the hint and turned their offensive stereo system volume back down to more reasonable levels of operation. Number 4. Emoji House Feud. Emojis are the universal language of the digital age. So, when a Californian resident found themselves in a feud with the neighbors, they decided to communicate their feelings using iant emojis plastered across the property. In a quintessentially modern revenge tactic, the California resident peppered their home's facade with massive cartoon emojis after neighbors snitched on them for illegally renting out the property on Airbnb. The peculiarly decorated eyesore of a house stood out like a sore thumb from the other nondescript homes in the beachside neighborhood. But the owner felt that this pink paint job was justified retaliation after neighbors reported the short-term rental violations to the authorities. Once she got slapped with fines for operating an underground vacation spot, this creative homeowner hired artists to give the place a spiteful makeover, aiming right at the neighbors who ratted them out. The exterior walls were decorated with giant emojis showing crossed eyes, a zipped lip, and a smiling green face with a tongue sticking out. These cheeky cartoon designs now faced the street for maximum exposure, ensuring the offended neighbors would see the visual message whenever they left the house. Essentially, a real-life, mega-sized emoji message. When questioned about the odd emoji art installation, the owner claimed it was public pop art showcasing the creative spirit and First Amendment rights. But local officials disagreed, deeming the designs a disturbing nuisance violating ordinances. They even issued fines over the unauthorized paint job and its impact. Yet the homeowner refused to paint over their creation, keeping the emoji-plastered house intact. The offended neighbors could only stew in front of the immature visual message, realizing they had ignited an artful war. Number 3. City and cops get revenge on neighbor. Some nosy neighbors just can't help but stick their nose where it doesn't belong, like tattling to the authorities about totally harmless activities happening next door. But one teenage entrepreneur breaking 0 actual laws had both the cops and city officials clap back in his defense when a cranky neighbor tried shutting down his summer hot dog biz. 13-year-old Jaquan Faulkner kicked off a humble hot dog stand in front of his Minnesota home, never expecting his weekend side hustle would stir up drama. But some sour neighbor took major issue with the bustling dog cart and snitched to city officials about this illegal operation. Rather than shoo away young Jaquan over permitting stuff, Minneapolis had this kid's back. The city let him keep grilling dogs and even helped get the cart fully licensed and above board. The health department hooked him up with the works: hand washing station, fridge thermometer. The department even spotted Jaquan the money for all the legit permits he needed to be official. And boom, Jaquan's old-fashioned hot dogs was open for business. Even the cops joined in defending this now fully certified dog slinger. After getting him squared away paperwork-wise, officers gifted Jaquan with a primo stainless steel cart and umbrella free of charge. Dog condiments included. So thanks to a noisy neighbor who didn't think first before snitching, Jaquan is now rolling in the bundo with his own booming hot dog empire at age 13. Turns out nosy neighbors sometimes accidentally help your business explode. Number 2. Alarm clock in the wall. Imagine an unseen clock ticking loudly in your wall, impossible to find, and silence. It's straight out of a freaky Edgar Allan Poe story. That was the reality for one new homeowner after finding a mystery alarm clock hidden inside their wall, chiming ceaselessly each evening. Like clockwork, this phantom timekeeper sounded its nightly chime at exactly 7:50 p.m. without fail, baffling the homeowners. Though they got used to the routine noise after 13 years, the owners were itching to solve this bizarre puzzle. Assuming its old batteries would die, they expected the chime to end after a few months. But nope, this unstoppable clock just kept ticking. Once their story went viral online, a company volunteered to open the wall and retrieve the thing. But after freeing the stubborn alarm, the amazed owners displayed it proudly on the mantle, manually rewinding it daily to preserve their new 7:50 p.m. ritual. To them, the vintage clock had become too sentimentally linked to their home's oddball charm to totally silence. No one knows why the clock was originally stuck inside the wall. Some speculated prankster previous owners concealed it intentionally as a surprise timer for the next folks. Hiding a battery-powered noisemaker like that in the walls is grade-A revenge craftsmanship. Nothing haunts a new homeowner more than the eerie echo of an unseen clock. Number 1. Crow Caller. It seems that good-natured mischief between neighbors can sometimes bring more joy than straightforward confrontation when disputes arise. At least that was the case for Stuart Panter, a cheeky resident who loved nothing more than playing light-hearted pranks on his high-strung neighbor, Denzel Mandel. Stuart would spend his days devising increasingly elaborate schemes just to get under Denzel's skin, though it appeared to be all in good fun. One of Stuart's more genius pranks involved taking advantage of the crows nesting in the trees near Denzel's immaculately kept lawn. Armed with a crow call that mimicked a crow's stress call, Stuart stealthily placed a speaker in Denzel's garden and remotely activated it. This clever trick soon summoned a murder of crows to descend upon the unsuspecting neighbor's lawn. Before long, over 300 crows had arrived and commenced shredding the grass to get at the seed Denzel had just spread. As the birds overran his pristine lawn, a red-faced Denzel rushed outside, stomping about in a rage as he discovered Stuart's hidden speaker. Stuart could barely contain his laughter as he watched the chaos unfold from his daughter's bedroom window. While Denzel fumed over the damage, Stuart was already plotting his next stunt. Though undeniably mischievous, Stuart claimed he never intended real harm, just some clever payback for minor neighborly annoyances over the years. The crow caller prank is actually a common revenge tactic adopted by disgruntled neighbors worldwide. The devices mimic crow alarm calls to signal danger, drawing large numbers of crows to congregate and investigate the perceived threat. This influx of birds inevitably creates a nuisance, disrupting the target neighbor's property. In fact, crow caller complaints have been on the rise in many communities, with some cities even proposing restrictions on their use. Authorities recommend resolving disputes through proper channels rather than resorting to crow chaos. But for crafty jokesters like Stuart, the crow call offers some harmless hijinks without doing any real damage. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.